Good evening. On behalf of the Center for Environment and Society, the William James Forum, Anthropology Club, and the Washington College Ducks Unlimited chapter, I would like to thank everyone for coming out tonight for our talk, Hunt, Gather, Cook, Finding the Forgotten Feast, with writer and chef Hank Shaw. Many of us at Washington College, Chestertown, and the greater community are avid hunters and fishermen, or more properly, anglers, as I learned last night from our speaker, enjoy the abundance of fish, waterfowl, white-tailed deer, and wild turkey present in our fields and rivers. Others are simply locavores seeking the most cherished of our wild-caught and foraged foods. But few of us have taken the extra step or even know how to prepare wild foods in such a gourmet manner as our speaker tonight, with the exception of maybe Dr. Bill Schindler, who couldn't make it. It was with Dr. Bill Schindler that I first realized the importance of hunted and gathered foods as a student in one of his archaeology classes many years ago. He introduced me to the use of stone tools to butcher and scrape the hide of deer, and that hunted animals can provide more than just food when the use of the whole animal is used in a sustainable way. And now, as an anthropologist and beneficiary of wild foods, I have explored fad diets and food movements and their effects on society. Food movements, whether they are about the most popular diets or where we get our food from, are important topics that should not be ignored. The Center for Environment and Society realizes this and has taken a stance to provide speakers and programs such as Locavore Lit Fest in the past, to last year's Recipes for Change, and most recently Food Day. All of these events, including tonight's, serve as an educational venue on sustainable food sources for our community. Conventional outsourcing for animal food production and processing has negative effects on the environment, health, and social costs. It is up to us, especially the millennial generation, to be informed and make decisions about where we get our food. Hank Shaw turns wild foods most people would not even think of eating into delicious meals. He advocates collecting and hunting food in sustainable and environmentally friendly ways. He seeks honest food, which includes nothing packaged, nothing boxed, and nothing wrapped in plastic. Other than pork fat and the occasional octopus, he has not bought meat or fish more than a handful of times in the past decade.
I have a thing for octopus, just so you know.
He enjoys eating locally and making food from scratch. His style of food acquisition and preparation is one that the Washington College community should be aware of, and we are very pleased to have him here with us tonight. He will speak on the importance of wild food sources, and how to prepare foods with such a focus on unique approaches, such as using underutilized parts of animals, including gizzards, hearts, and livers. Often, these cuts of meat are forgotten and disposed of, yet they are not only edible, but sometimes the most nutritious. Hank Shaw is a chef, forager, hunter, angler, and writer. In addition to publishing in a number of periodicals, including Food and Wine and Field and Stream, he has also published 2 cookbooks, including Hunt, Gather, Cook, Finding the Forgotten Feast, and most recently, Duck, Goose, Recipes and Techniques for Ducks and Geese, both wild and domestic. Both of these will be available for purchase after tonight's talk. He is also working on a 3rd book about venison, which should be of interest to those deer hunters in the room. And he also maintains a strong web presence through his website and blog, Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, which won Best Food Blog by the James Beard Foundation in 2013 and was awarded the Burt Green Award from the International Association of Culinary Professionals for Best Food Blog in both 2010 and 2011. He has been featured on a few TV shows, including Bizarre Foods America, The Sporting Chef, and will appear on Mike Rowe's Somebody's Gotta Do It this spring, so we should all keep an eye out for him. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Hank Shaw.
That was a pretty crazy intro. I mean, this makes me sound like I'm actually somebody, which is... it's really interesting when I get up in front of people and talk about stuff that I do, is just I just do it, and because I've been gifted enough to where I've been a writer professionally for, since 1990. I know how to put it on paper, or in this case on a computer screen. I used to think that what I did was unusual. And I've been a forager and a fisherman since, I don't know, I was 3. I was telling some people earlier today, I was stoked to see those silly little lawn onions that are everywhere in your yard and you try and get rid of them. But when I was a tiny little kid, there's this picture of me from the 70s picking and eating those little lawn onions. And that's kind of like, that was the thing that sort of set me on this path, I guess, that I'm on. And my mom is a proper Yankee Gloucester fisherman. And so I grew up fishing codfish and fishing flounder. And, the first picture of me fishing is imagine me small. And I'm holding a flounder, it's not a 6-foot flounder. It's, I'm like 2 feet tall, and I'm holding a flounder the same size as me, and it's just, and it never really occurred to me that there was any other kind of way of living. And it has been a kind of a backdrop to who I am and what I do all the way through my whole other careers. And what's interesting is the power of the internet is fascinating in that I realize that I'm not alone. So raise your hand if you guys are hunters of any kind of way. Raise your hand if you are fishermen in any kind of way. Raise your hand if you pick edible wild plants and or mushrooms. See? I'm not alone. There's all kinds of people who do what I do and they call it living. And there's people who don't do what I do and they think I'm some sort of, carnival freak. I did a talk in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is not the most rural place in the world. And it's not the most angler or hunter-friendly place in the world. And people were fascinated by what I do because they didn't realize it was possible in this day and age, that you could actually fish, forage, and be reasonably, I'm not off the grid, mind you, anybody who knows who I am, which, thank you, anybody who knows who I am, you know who I am because of the internet. So I'm not like I'm a Luddite. I'm not, I don't hate technology. But I've chosen to try to dehinge myself from a particular food system that I'm not real fond of. And I was talking before in an anthropology class today that it's a choice that I've chosen. It's what I've done. And many of you, to some extent, have done it as well. And we're not carnival freaks. We're who we, as in the big we, as in the Homo sapiens we are who we are. And the reason why I think what we do is more popular now than it was, say, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is because at no point in the history of our species have we been so divorced from the natural world. At no point have we been so far away from who brought us to the dance. If you think about it, how many people here from the anthropology department? A few? If you take all of our species' existence, I think I'm getting a double reverb here, I'm going to step here. If you think about all our history, let's just say a history of just us, just Homo sapiens. It's an argument of whether it's 200,000 years or 100,000 years. It's more or less that. If it was one single day, agriculture shows up at 11:54 at night. All that other day, the whole rest of the part of the daytime, we were hunters and gatherers. It's who we are. It's what we're built to be. And now I'm not saying that you should all be, off the grid and hunt and gather and live in a hut and eat, acorns. If you want to, go for it. Have at it. If you want to eat packaged chicken, go for it. Have at it. That's your choice. What I'm saying is that we need to actually just touch the wild more than we ever did, because so much of our professional lives and so much of what we do and how we interact is not that. It is electronic, it is mechanical, it's ones and zeros. And those of us who hunt and fish and forage or who garden, it's another question, how many of us garden? A lot of us, I am hunter, angler, gardener, cook, even though the gardener is every much as much foraging as it is in an actual garden, but I garden 12 months of the year because I can, because I live in Northern California. But you can too here, too, actually. This is not a very cold climate. If you had a hoop house, you're in good shape. I know a guy named Elliot Coleman who gardens vegetables in Maine all year long. So if he can do it, you guys can do it. It's part of being part of the natural world. And, well, why? Who cares? Why shouldn't I just live in a city? Why shouldn't I just live in a metal box? Go to work in a metal box, work in a concrete box, look out of a glass box at other boxes going by. What's so wrong with that? Well, I would argue that you lose something. A part of you dies in that. And it's a part of you that you don't even know died until you get it back. And how is it that, go to New York City. Anybody ever been to New York City? Manhattan. All right. If you've been to Manhattan on a sunny day, in springtime or in summertime or in early fall, go to Central Park. It looks like the entire population of Manhattan is in Central Park. Why? Because there is this reptilian brain need to see green, to touch grass, to get dirt under your fingernails. And this is an audience here where everybody else is like, well, yeah, of course. Because the people who live in our world, when you are in touch with nature, there's a certain calmness. Everything else can happen. Anybody know anybody who's born and raised in Manhattan? They're the most neurotic human beings on the face of the earth. I used to live in Manhattan. They're good people, but the reason Seinfeld works as a comedy is because it's a certain set of people. They're great people. They just are. They have a horrific case of nature deficit disorder, and that's the sort of the 30,000-foot view of what I try to do. I used to be a political reporter for 18 years. I covered 2 presidential races. I covered Congress. Watched the first season of House of Cards. Sadly, it is the most realistic portrayal of Congress that has ever been put on film, which should give you great faith in our government. I've been lied to for a living. And if you don't think that someone in that line of work, dressed up in a suit and tie, I had my full battle armor. I had the third piece to everything. If you don't think that someone in that situation needs to cast a line or to plant something or to go deer hunting or whatever, be that person for a while. You start shaking. The reason why we need this is biological, but there's a lot of aspects to it. There's that sort of calmness and that peace that we're all looking for. There's also just a very strict biological reason. Like I was saying, we've been hunter-gatherers as a species for a great long time. We as human beings are designed, we're built to eat a little bit of a lot of things. Unfortunately, Americans eat a hell of a lot of very little things. We're meant to eat a lot of a little. Split it. I always get that wrong. A little of a lot, not a lot of little. There's a huge amount of evidence and data that suggests that a varied diet makes you healthier. I don't care, eat whatever you want. Here's my iron rule. If you forget everything else today, my iron rule is this. If you want to be happy and healthy and wonderful, eat whatever you damn well please, but make it yourself. If you want to eat ho-hos, make ho-hos. If you want to eat fried chicken, make fried chicken. If you want to eat a burger with blue cheese stuffed in it, guacamole on it, wrapped in bacon, deep fried and breaded, and then stuck in a lattice of more bacon so that you need a shoehorn to get it in your mouth, and if you make it, go for it. Because 2 things are going to happen. 1, you're not going to want to eat it every day. And 2, you realize that it's actually quite difficult to make ho-hos. Make it I was talking before in the anthropology class. The ability to be in and around nature can be as small as going to the produce department and picking up something that you've never picked up, a new fruit, a new vegetable, a new nut, a real piece of food, not a new package, not something that is new and improved, which is highly likely to be new and not improved, but find something like, how many people eat kohlrabi here? Wow, slobs? I never heard of kohlrabi until I went to Wisconsin, and everybody eats kohlrabi in Wisconsin. I'm like, what is this thing? Well, we're Slavic, we eat it. For me, it's the metaphor for the weird vegetable that nobody eats, but it's good. And everyone's like, of course it's good, you fool. And but that's the thing. If you know how to cook, and if you diversify your diet, you will be happier. I take this to another level, and I think at least half the people here in the room take it to another level of extending your world outside the produce aisle. Either it's in your garden, or it's in your, or it's in a tree stand, or it's on the bay, or it's on the river, or it's in the marsh, or it's in the woods. Because there's a reason for doing this beyond just diet and beyond just sort of peace of mind. There's a certain fun aspect to it too, and people don't like to talk about. It is difficult to talk about the fun of hunting, because the end result of hunting is very much not fun. It's very much heavy. It's a big deal. And people who have hunted their whole lives have internalized this big deal, and they recognize it, but they don't really talk about it. I didn't start hunting until I was 32 years old. So I've been hunting a little while now. But I didn't start as a kid. I foraged and I fished as a kid. So I've caught more fish than anyone has a right to. I used to be a commercial fisherman. I used to literally bail squid with snow shovels in a thing. I used to work as a mate, and I've caught 500 fish a day, sometimes more. I know how to cut fish. Never once have I had the fish. Never had it. Probably because I started cutting fish when I was 4 years old. It's what you do. It's internalized. The other reason is fish aren't us. Anybody who listens to Kurt Cobain knows that it's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feet, if you remember that song. But it's true. It's a trite little line in a otherwise really good story. But here's the thing. Fish aren't us. They're cold. They're different. They're other. Every culture in the world, fish is not us, with a couple of exceptions, and those are mostly in Polynesia. But for the most part, fish aren't us. They're the other. They don't occupy the same mind space as birds and mammals, especially mammals. So I'll tell you a story. So the first time I ever hunted, I didn't hit anything. I was out in South Dakota, and I was with my friend Chris, and we had been fishing buddies forever, and he'd gotten me into hunting. And he's like, yeah, let's go out and we'll hunt some pheasants. I'm like, all right, sweet, it's gonna be great. So I'd been on the rifle team as a high school kid, so I knew how to shoot a rifle, but I'd never shot a shotgun before in my life. And so my entire practice for hunting pheasants the first time is throwing up tin cans and milk jugs, like, hit that! I finally hit one. He's like, good, you're on. We're ready to go. I was ready to go. I missed everything. I blew through like 3 boxes of shells. I might have hit a feather once, maybe. And he was just, boom, boom, boom. We were done so fast that we got to see the entire Packer game, and which is a big deal in that part of the world. And I was amazed and shocked and fascinated by it, about his ability to read land and his ability to be capable. And that's sort of the core of where the so-called fun of hunting lies in. The core of it isn't fun at oh yay, we're killing an animal. The fun of it is you have succeeded at that which you have set out to do, and often something that has taken you a long time to get good at. And it's not really necessarily pulling the trigger, although sometimes it is if you hunt birds that fly really super fast or are juking like doves and pigeons, which, by the way, a pigeon, for those of you who are wing shooters, is the fastest game animal on North America. A pissed off pigeon can fly 96 miles an hour and juke. Hit that. Most of us are hitting them when they're coming out of the barn and they don't know what's hitting them. But we have wild pigeons in California called bandtails. They're about half again the size of a regular pigeon you guys know of. One of the hardest birds in the world to hit, and delicious. But that's the thing. There is this sort of, I did it, And it doesn't really translate well for people who don't hunt. Because what it looks like from the outside is, yay, I killed this animal. Yay, I have this dominion over this, this fellow creature, this dead thing. It looks terrible. Like, especially on hunting TV, which is a whole other topic, which I'm happy to get into, but it's not really the rant I want to go into right now. But, you see guys from up in a tree stand going, woo, What they don't tell you, and what they should on that hunting television is, A, the guy was in the tree stand every day for 4 weeks. I think you would be the same way if you had stood in a tree stand every day and for 4 weeks you finally got the deer, right? I mean, think about it. Have you done anything unsuccessfully every day for 4 weeks and then finally succeeded? And if you did not let out at least a little yelp of joy, you're dead. I'm sorry, it's just not possible. I mean, think about it. Like, think about the gardeners, and there are certain seeds that are really hard to germinate. When you finally see that thing coming up, it's virtually the same feeling. Yay, I did it successfully. That's what it is. That's a way for someone who doesn't hunt to understand. Like, germinate a difficult seed. Find a particular plant that you've been looking for. Like, when I first started morel mushroom hunting, how many people hunt morels? Few. When I started morel hunting, I went 2 years without finding a morel. 2 years. You think I didn't shout when I finally found one? You could probably heard me from New York. It's the same kind of thing. But the real thing that's going on underneath it is that you're self-sufficient, or you're one step closer to being self-sufficient. You are a more complete human being. All of us want that. And I was talking about in the anthro class about there's a great story of there's a woman named Temple Grandin. She's a very famous animal behaviorist, and she gets animals the way like most of us don't. And so she was brought into a zoo. And all the animals were super depressed. It was a big cat cage. And there was a bunch of panthers and leopards that were just moping around. They didn't want to do anything. And the zoo people were like, this is terrible. You have depressed cats. And they look depressed, so we need to do something. So they brought Temple in, and she discovered, well, they had nothing to do. So what she designed was, and every day, instead of having meat thrown at them, every day the animals had to solve a problem, to solve a puzzle. And unless they solved that puzzle, they didn't eat. And every couple of weeks or so, that puzzle would change. Instantly, the cats were cats again. Because, I don't know if I've been around big cats, but big cats are basically like little cats, except they're bigger, and you're the ball of string. And so they were all of a sudden frisky and playful, and their tails are going up, and they're being cats. The reason was because they had done something. They were more capable cats. We're not different. There is a fundamental difference between opening up a package of skinless, slimy, very unrecognizable chicken breasts than there is from catching a trout or a rockfish or feeling that cherry stone clam on your toes when you're digging for them, or finding the morels. That act of self-sufficiency makes you more complete as a person. That's what we seek. And that's my drug. That and beer. I like beer. My drug, what I want to do all the time, is learn a new craft, learn a new skill. Like Bill Schindler, flint napping, awesome. I don't know how to do it. I'd love to learn how to do it. Too bad he's not here. But think about it. For I don't know how many, like 2 million years, we were flint napping, and everybody here in this room could do it if we were, at some point in the past. I bet you there are some people here who know. Can any of you guys do it? This is the only room in America where somebody's going to raise their hand, right? Because of Bill. But that's a cool skill, right? I got a rock and another rock, and I can make a cutting blade. Bitchin', right? And, that's a piece of that whole, you're a more complete person. All right, here's another one. This is a good one. How many guys don't know how to fix your own oil? Don't know how to change your own oil? Raise your hand.
Don't know how to do what?
Don't know how to change your own oil? Raise your hand. Half of you are liars. Half of you are too chicken to raise your hand because guess what? Every male red-blooded American in the country is supposed to be able to change his own oil. Right? I guarantee you there's at least 10 people in this room who are lying. I'm not going to call you out. That's fine. We all have our own crosses to bear. But I'm man enough to admit I don't know jack about changing my own oil. I used to, back when it was easy. But now that, the cars are all different, the pan's in the wrong place, and I have chosen to not care about changing my own oil. It's a choice. Because usually, let me preface this. I drive a Toyota Tacoma with 340,000 miles on it. Whenever I get my oil changed, which is, every 7,000 miles, whether it needs it or not, usually there's something else breaking on it. So, yeah, change the oil while you're at it. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. But I've chosen not to be a home auto mechanic. I've chosen to be good at something else. And that's wild food, and that's hunting and fishing and foraging and learning how to cook it. Well, it's no different. Like I was saying before at the anthro class, like all you have to do if you want to do this, like because I'm sure there's a few of you here who do foraging and who do hunting and who do fishing. But even for those few people who are sitting here who have all three of those skill sets, I guarantee you there's room for improvement in all three. Because if you're not, you're fooling yourself, because I've been doing some of this stuff my entire life, and there's enormous amounts of stuff that I'm still pretty ignorant about, but I want to learn. All you have to do is choose to learn. Very little of this is rocket science. The closest is mushrooms, and even then, I could probably teach you 7 to 10 edible mushrooms in a day. Some of them are just not that hard. People make it out to be hard because there's a few that'll kill you dead, but there's a few plants that'll kill you dead. You know, there's a couple of fish that'll actually kill you dead if you're down in the Caribbean. It's what we choose to put our minds to. And it's not hard, and I try in my books to provide more information and to let you know that this stuff is all around you. The forgotten feast. What that is it's forgotten in some places, like half the people in this room haven't forgotten it. Half the people in this room know when the rockfish run, know when the shad are in the river, know when the perch are in the river, know when to go to the deer stand, know when to hunt geese, know when to pick ramps, know when the morels are here. I mean, this region is one of the more fertile and awesome regions to do what we do in. There are places where it's difficult. This is not one of them. You have some of the best goose hunting in the world. You have pretty good duck hunting, says the Californian. For those of you who give me stink eye now, we shoot more ducks in California than any state but Louisiana, and it's warm when we're doing it. You're welcome to come out, and I will take you out anytime. But you have tons of fishing, really good hunting, and really good array of edible plants. Like I was talking to the class before, and we were walking around campus and we're looking at this thing and that thing. Like there's a bunch of edible plants that are right here, and there's 4 or 5 that I pointed out, but there was another 3 or 4 that I didn't even bother pointing out because they're edible. I mean, I'm not Bear Grylls. I'm not Les Stroud. I'm not about survival man. I could if I needed to, but that's not my thing. The most hilarious phone call I got in the last year was the casting people from Naked and Afraid called me. How fast can you say no because I said it faster? First of all, I don't want to inflict that on the world. And second of all, it is a train wreck of a show. Like if you've ever watched it, you can't not watch it because it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is the most horrible thing. Like I must watch it. And it's a disaster, but you watch it. But that's not me. I'm about flavor, because guess what? Yeah, I was a forager, and yeah, I was as a fisherman from day one, and I've been a hunter for 14 years now. God, has it been that long? I'm getting old. But I was a cook first. My background's in food. Somebody asked me the other day, are you a hunter who cooks or are you a cook who hunts? I'm a cook who hunts. I have professional training. The reason why I first picked up a shotgun that day in South Dakota was because Chris, my friend, had been slowly it's like that crack dealer, like the first hit's free, right? Second one you got to pay for it. But the thing is, I really wanted it. I wanted to eat more pheasants. I wanted to eat more mallards. I wanted to eat more geese. And my God, he gave me a part of a venison backstrap, which at the time I really had no idea how big a deal that was. But it was just great, great food. And that's another thing that's mostly lost on even some hunters and anglers. It's like, I can fry it, or I can drown it in cream of mushroom soup, or I can wrap bacon around it. And I'm not going to rip too hard on the venerable popper, which if you don't know what a popper is a piece of random meat, usually red, usually duck, usually venison, stuffed in a jalapeno, often with cream cheese, sometimes not, wrapped in a piece of bacon with a toothpick through it, and thrown on the grill until the bacon is cooked. It is admittedly good. It is the most ghetto wild game thing that you will see all over the country. To the point where I'm doing a fancy dinner. The head of Ducks Unlimited is a Californian. It's a guy named Paul Bonderson. He's going to be inducted as the president of the whole organization in, I think, this month, actually. So I donated a dinner for him at his house in California, and he's a billionaire. Like, I've never been in such rare air, but he's a tech guy, so he's like us. Like, he's not actually, he's not this guy. He's wearing shirts like we are. And so he's talking about this great dish that he does. And he's describing it ingredient by ingredient. I'm like, oh, mother of God, it's a popper. So we're going to do poppers at this billionaire. I mean, we're going to do other stuff as well, but yeah, it's admittedly good. And so that's as much as I'm going to hate on the popper. But there's so much more to wild game than the 3 or 4 ways that a lot of people cook it. And I'll tell you why, and even if you don't, you probably have some inkling in your head of why you cook game the way you do, without necessarily being able to verbalize it. The simple reason is the equivalent is this. If you're not a hunter, and you're not an angler, and you buy, say, Copper River sockeye, or you buy prime ribeye, or you buy a bunch of lobsters, or you buy anything that is pretty precious, you don't want to mess it up. You take extra care to not screw this up. Because guess what? You just dumped a whole bunch of money down the drain. Well, for those of us who are hunters and anglers, especially hunters, not only it's not really a function of money, because we don't think in those terms. If we did, we wouldn't do it, because the cost-benefit analysis, unless you're really blessed on wild game, is not good. If you're shooting out of your backyard, yeah, it is. But the amount of money we spend on gear and shells and travel and gasoline and more shells and processing stuff and more shells and is enormous, especially for people who are just starting out. Like, I got a guy into duck hunting in California, and he's an accountant, which is a bad thing. I'm not, it's just like, dude, don't think of it in those terms. You're like, but I have to, I'm an accountant, I have no choice. Each duck he shot that first year cost him $327.48. They got cheaper as he got better, but that's not what we're thinking. What we're thinking of is all of the time that we put in for X or Y animal, and all of the effort. And even if you've been hunting since you were a tot, there's still the recognition that it was a living being. And here's something about hunters that non-hunters tend to not know. We know animals better than almost anybody, because we're in their environment really quiet all the time. And we're watching, and we're processing information. And what that does, yes, we have a purpose. We're looking for ducks, we're looking for rabbits, we're looking for squirrels, we're looking for deer, whatever it is that we're looking for. But we see everything. There was a moment, I guess it was 5 years ago, where I don't hunt in a tree stand. You really don't hunt in tree stands in the West because we don't have whitetails. We've got blacktails and muleys. So I'm in this big open conifer forest up in the Sierra Nevada, and I'm leaning behind a tree, and there's a way where these muleys walk by, mule deer, walk by on a trail, and I had a pretty good idea that they would come because I'd been there the previous day, and I saw fresh scat, and I saw fresh. I see things. What you do when you're a hunter is you see things that hikers don't see. So I knew that there was a pretty good chance that a deer was going to walk by. So I'm sitting right here. I'm really still, because it's an open forest, and deer can see a lot, and they can smell even farther. And they can hear even farther. There's an old Indian expression that if a leaf falls in the forest, the eagle sees it, the bear smells it, the deer hears it. So you got to be dead quiet. And most human beings are not dead quiet. So I've been here for like an hour. And that's another thing that non-hunters tend to not have that ability to stand still. You have to try it. If you're not a hunter, stand still for an hour. Don't move a muscle. Try it. But you can't do it. We can, because we have a purpose. So anyway, I'm standing there. I'm waiting for the deer to come by, and deer hasn't come by yet. And I feel something on my shoulder. And this is how you move if you're actually hunting. And it's a kinglet, which, if you don't know what a kinglet is, it's like the world's smallest bird. It's a little finchy, wrenny-looking thing, like that big. And if you're ever in the deep woods, it goes, you can almost not hear it, but it's this tiny, tiny bird. And I was quiet and still so long that kinglet wasn't scared of me anymore. And I actually looked over and like, hey, how's it going? Because I'm from California and I say that to birds. And he said, hey, how's it going? I couldn't understand it because I don't speak kinglet. But the point of it is he stayed there. Even when I turned and I moved, he didn't immediately fly off. He did, eventually, because kinglets are nervous animals and they don't stay anywhere very fast. But he stayed long enough for me to watch. And there's 100 moments like that every season. And every hunter has that. We don't always talk about it, largely because you don't ask us. But it's what we hold inside. Like the times in the marsh when you see... How many people... do you have coots around here? You know, the American coot, which we call the dorks of the marsh. They're just goofy birds, right? You know, the ivory-billed black duck, we call them. They're just goofy birds. They're like, burp, 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 and they just do goofy things, and they make you laugh. And ruddy ducks make you laugh, because ruddy ducks are this particular diver duck that likes to fly this far off the ground at 175 miles an hour. And it's just like, hey, Earl, did you see that duck? Nope. It's just these moments that are precious to us. You know, when you're offshore, I've spent a lot of time offshore fishing. When you see flying fish, coolest thing ever, right? Dude, it's a flying fish. I can't believe I just saw a flying fish. I've only seen those in National Geographic. But if you're out there, you see them. Dolphins in your wake. We were offshore for a couple of days, and we're trying to fall asleep. And we're on the boat, and we're playing music. And I kid you not, a bunch of bottlenose came behind our boat and started doing like the flipper thing, like the faces out of the water to the music. No one, I mean, I wish I had it on video. This was before iPhones, but no one would believe me. Like, no way, that totally didn't happen. Like, yes, it did. Yeah, it did. And you get those moments. And what you get to do when you bring it home is you get to relive the moment. It's not just a rack of antlers on the wall. It's that meal. But go back to the big cats. That meal, remember that time the dolphins came in the back of the boat? This is the tuna from that trip. This is the wahoo from that trip. And you get to relive it all over again. Every meal is a story. Every meal is an adventure when you live in this world. Remember that time when I fell down the ravine and sprained my ankle and it took me 24 hours to get out? These are the morels from that trip. Actually happened. You said this is a job that's not without danger. But you did something for it. And the reason why a lot of people will cook their food 4 or 5 different ways is because that is a special moment and they don't want to mess it up. What I try to do, and what I've been trying to do since 2007 when I started Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, is to try and give you a helping hand. Sounds too pedantic. It's really, I'm just trying to show you what's possible, what you can do, that gizzards can be awesome, that deer hearts can be awesome, that shanks, I'm an evangelist for deer shanks. If there's no reason to ever grind a deer shank, and I'm going to have an entire section of my cookbook about it. Because I come from a food space and not from it originally as a hunter, I view everything as a possibility. And because I have some skills in the kitchen and I can write, who knows? Like, how do you know where you got where you are? You're the sum of all your decisions, right? And how could I possibly have imagined that I got to this place where, I have a master's degree plus in history, so I know how to do research. I can read boring stuff too. Sorry, history teachers. I can read scientific papers because I minored in biology, marine science actually, but same thing. I was a journalist for 18 years, so I had a job of teaching complicated subjects to regular people. I was a cook. I've been a hunter. So all of these things have helped me create a body of work that helps you. I don't care how you cook your game. I want to show you that you possibly can do other things with your game. And I'm going to give you a recipe that is easy to understand, that's very well tested, that works. So don't be scared. when I tell you to do X or Y, Z to that backstrap, or to that duck breast, or to that rabbit, or to that rockfish. Because I've been there, and I know what could go wrong, and I'll tell you what could go wrong, and I'll tell you that if you do this, you will be sad. But if you do that, you will not be sad. And can I cook high-end cuisine, like with foams and all kinds of garbage like that? Yeah, I can do that. I know how to spherify stuff and do all sorts of molecular crap. But it's soulless. What I want is to create really good plates of food that everybody here could look at and say, that's a good-looking plate of food. I'd like to eat that. And I will tell you what the difference is between, say, a lamb shank and a venison shank. You know what the difference is? Time. That's it. No difference. Time. You can cook a lamb shank in 90 minutes. Typically, it takes 2.5 hours to cook a deer shank. Other than that, virtually the same. Virtually the same. Size, maybe. If it's a really big honkin' whitetail, you might want to ossobuco the shank. Have anybody here have ossobuco? Not a lot of Italians, huh? Ossobuco is an Italian dish where you take a big old calf shank like that and you cut it into rounds about that thick. And then you braise that. Because, imagine nobody's got a pot big enough for a cow's shank, right? It's that big. Maybe you got a pot that big, but I don't. And it's just another way of doing it. But I tell you, hey, if you got a big honkin' whitetail, take a knife, cut around that shin, because, anybody who's a deer hunter here knows, well, everybody should know what a shank is, right? It's your calf muscle. You'll find that all butchers are like, so it's about like this. They always are touching themselves. It's like, well, the second joint of a bird's wing is like this, because it is. We're all built the same, which is a little disconcerting. And then it's actually like, hey, we're all the same. And that's actually an interesting point. But anyway, with a shank, it's not rocket science. It's what you choose to learn. And I'm trying to just sort of make it understandable and easy to learn, and I have some skills to pass on, and that's all I really care about. And hopefully I get to do this long enough and not have to go back to the cubicle. And I'm always wondering when this is going to run out, when it's going to end. Like, imagine, because I know no party lasts forever. I mean, how is this? I get to hunt, fish, forage, and write, and teach for a living. Like, really? How is this happening? Like, when do I wake up, right? And the thing I realized is it'll probably end someday. Who knows why? And that's not really for me to dwell on because it just makes me sad. But until it doesn't, think about, you guys are going to forget 90% of what I talked to you about today. That's fine. But you'll remember something. Maybe you just remember that I'm crazy, and that's good enough. But you'll remember that there's something else that you can do with what you bring home. You'll remember that just being out there and touching the wild places of the world is worth it in and of itself. And you'll find, a recipe. By the way, if you Google anything to do with wild game or fish or foraging, chances are it's my recipe. And so that's the easy way to keep in touch because I answer all the emails I get. And I literally have gotten emails to the effect of, I just ate this mushroom, should I have? Sometimes the answer is no. Don't be that person. But I do get, Instagram, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and all that stuff, and I do answer things every day. Somebody sending me a twit pic of like, what's this plant? Like, typically I know what it is, but if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But that's the point, is I'm here to help. And I want to be able to answer your questions, and if I don't know the answer to your questions, I'll probably be able to find out because smart people don't know everything. Smart people know where to find the answer. And I'll be the first to admit that there is huge swaths of stuff that I'm just completely ignorant about, but I'm interested and I'm working on it every day. And if I know something that I can help you with, I will. And that's why I do what I do, and that's why I'm here. And I don't know if you guys have questions about, and you can basically pepper me with questions about whatever, and I'll tell you if I don't know. I mean, I have been in this area. I'm from New Jersey. My brother went to college in Delaware. I've lived in Fredericksburg and Richmond, Virginia, so I know this. I fished the Chesapeake. I've fished the Eastern Shore. I've hunted the Eastern Shore, so I have some knowledge of this area. So think about a question, fire away.
So when you were walking around campus, what were the plants that you saw?
Probably, I saw my first love, the lawn onion. The lawn onion's everywhere. It's the lawn onion. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever mowed a lawn and smelled onions?
Oh,
It's a Allium canadense is its Latin name, but it's just a weed here that people like ignore. Like, it's the best scallion in the world. There's no better scallion because it's so strong and so powerful that you can just chop it into little teeny pieces and garnish, and you got an onion flavor to it. Regular chives are weaker. And it's an interesting point about wild food in general. Wild food in general tastes more of itself. So a wild onion is going to be stronger than a domesticated onion. A pheasant is going to taste stronger than a chicken. Deer is going to taste stronger than lamb, for example, although they're pretty close, actually. Wild turkey is going to taste much stronger than the horrible butterballs, but they are pretty equivalent to a well-raised turkey. So in general, your wild food is going to be denser, smaller, tougher, older, more flavorful, and it tends to be leaner. Although ducks in a wintering ground where I live, we have hugely fat ducks where I live, so we're blessed with that. But I mean, these are some general principles that you'll always find with wild food, and and that onion is a great example of it. We also found Pennsylvania bittercress, which is a little brassica. If you look around the lawns right now, they're all little white flowers. Tons and tons of little white flowers. And you'll see what looks a little bit like watercress will be the leaf. And they're everywhere. Dandelions, of course. And this is a time for dandelions. By the way, if you pick dandelions and you eat them in July, you will be sad. Dandelions are a cold weather green. They do not like warm weather. They become impossibly bitter, like inedible bitter, like spit it out bitter. And if you're not a vegetarian, dandelion greens really like bacon fat. It's a perfect match. Dandelion greens, cooked in bacon fat with a squirt of lemon over it, money. Absolute money. Add some pasta, you got a meal. Add the bacon, you get an even better meal. Because I don't hate bacon, I just don't wrap everything in bacon. Those are probably the best ones. We saw chickweed. There's eastern red cedar, which is actually a juniper that's here. You can take the berries for juniper berries. Do not, by the way, if you're picking juniper berries, take the juniper, the little landscaping juniper. That's toxic. Look for the eastern red cedar. Those are not toxic.
I found venison fat to be kind of waxy and not as palatable as other kinds of fat. Do you have any recommendation on how to approach?
Yeah, venison fat, everything in moderation. So venison fat, especially in this part of the world, is actually very, very good tasting. The problem is it's the fat in an animal that has the highest level of stearic acid, a particular fatty acid, of any animal that we normally eat. The only substance that we eat normally that has more stearic acid is chocolate. And if you eat chocolate, one of the great things about eating chocolate is that it coats your mouth with that lovely chocolatey flavor. Now imagine it being a dead deer. Not as good. Depends on my mood, but the flavor that it adds makes deer taste more like deer in a good way. So typically what I will do is one of two things. So if it's a sausage, right, I tend to make 5-pound batches of sausage. So if you scale up, just think of the ratio. In a 5-pound batch of sausage, I'm going to use 4 pounds of venison, 1/2 pound of pure pork fatback, and 1/2 pound of venison fat. It's enough where you won't get that mouth-coaty weirdness, but it's enough where ooh, that's a deer sausage and I like it. If you were to use all beef fat in that sausage, it would taste beefy, which isn't bad, but it's just boring. If it's on a roast, let's say it's a big hind leg roast, and it's got a fat cap on it. If it's a really thick fat cap, trim it. But a good 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch of a fat cap is, if you're roasting it, and if you're eating it fast, it's really, really good. It's funny because if you look at British recipes, old British recipes, now the British get much maligned for their cooking. And that's mostly a post-Second World War thing, which it was deserved. But in the 1800s and 1700s and 1600s and now, the British are the world champion roasters. They roast big pieces of meat better than any other culture. And the thing that their recommendations for venison is roasted hot and fast and serve it quick. Because when it's crispy on the outside and when it's really hot and when the fat's still running around, there's nothing better. But if it congeals, no good. So like if you have leftovers, cut all the fat off. Because you're fighting against that weird mouth coaty thing, which is just, it's not bad for you, it's just off-putting. And mostly that's what people say is taste, but it's really texture that the problem is.
Do you have any comments on roadkill?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a legal question. I don't know what the law is here, but in some states it's just flat out illegal to pick it up. Like California is flat out illegal, which I think is ridiculous. But, I mean, if I may or may not have, thrown a jackrabbit in the back of my truck that I hit, but I know people who live off it. I know a person in Colorado who's friends with the state cops, and the state cops call her up, say, "Hey, Butter," her nickname's Butter. "Hey, Butter, we got a dead elk on the road," and she'll come and pick it up. The thing about roadkill is there's an ick factor. There's oh my God, that whole second half of the thing has been mutilated factor. And then there's a temperature factor. I mean, it's just a question of food safety. Your nose is a really good guide. If it stinks, don't eat it. If it's really cold out, you're in good shape. For me, I live in a warm place. The only way I'm going to pick up a piece of roadkill is if I saw it get hit, or if I hit it, because I just live in a place that's just too warm. But if you live in Minnesota and it's the wintertime, have at it. And actually, what you're supposed to do in that case, like if it's a deer, is you call up the state highway patrol. They come in and say, "Yep, you hit a deer," and they give you a tag for it right there. A lot of states are like that. I don't know if this is one of them, but.
Would you say that right here, right now, conditions are perfect for the first morels to pop?
You're a little early. They're hitting them hard right now in South Carolina. I know the commercial guys are all in South Carolina. So could you find some? I hope so. We're going to go tomorrow and look for them. But I think you're about a week or two out. But you're close. And the ramps are starting to come up. I know I got a picture from a guy in downstate New York, like the Poughkeepsie area. And they're starting to come up. So if they're around, they'll be about this big right now. So ramps are wild onions, if you don't know them. And they live in the forest floor and deciduous floors. So they don't like pines. They'll be in all your like basswood and oaks and elms and hickories.
What's your thoughts on deer management? Because if you shoot like a young fawn, it's going to taste much better than an older buck.
Mm-hmm.
To manage the herd, you want to take the older buck compared to let the deer grow up. What are your thoughts on management/taste?
How many tags can you get in Maryland?
Archery, you can kill as many does as you want.
Well, there's your answer. In California, we can only get two tags, and they have to be bucks, and they have to be forked horn or better. So that's our law. So that answers the question. But in certain states, like if you've got a lot of deer, which it sounds like you got a lot of deer, and this is the other thing. I don't know I know one guy. He's not my friend, but I know every trophy hunter I know, except for that one guy, is only a trophy hunter because he shot 5 does and they're all in the freezer, and he's looking for Mr. Big Buck, right? And he eats Mr. Big Buck, but he's really eating these 5 does. So it's one of those things where if you're looking at it from the outside, the idea of a trophy hunter looks horrific, but there's another story to that, and it's first of all, with rare exceptions, he's eating the deer. And for the other reasons, they're usually shot their does with the freezer already. So I'd be lying if I told you I haven't knocked the spots off a few of them. Young of the years, I know a guy in Calgary who fights as hard as he can to get a cow elk or a calf elk tag, or not elk, moose tag every year. And he says it's the greatest wild game on the planet. And only Canadians can get them, but it's all herd management. So if you get multiple tags, it's like same thing. Like in California, you can shoot as many pigs as you want, but you have a tag for each of them. So we'll typically get a book of tags, 4 or 5 tags, and absolutely the stripy ones are good. But it's one of those things where we're trying to get rid of them. and there's lots of them. If it would, but like you could never do that in California with deer because we don't have enough deer. So in your situation in this state, absolutely. If I were living here, I would probably get a bunch of tags and shoot a bunch of does for the freezer, and I wouldn't necessarily care if it was young of the year or not. By the way, the reason why they set the seasons the way they are is because if you were to shoot a young of the year, the way they set the seasons is they're old enough to fend for themselves anyway, which is why we don't hunt deer in like May, because they wouldn't. There's a reason why they set hunting seasons at the time they do. Like I was just talking before about, like for example, ducks. If you were to hunt ducks now, their diet has completely changed from during duck season. Now they're all eating invertebrates, they're eating crustaceans, they're eating insects. They're all protein gorging because the boys are all chasing each other and chasing girls, and they're using all their energy doing that. And the girls are getting ready to lay eggs, which takes a lot of energy. So both species of ducks are eating as many protein-rich things as they can, and that translates into a very bad tasting duck. If you've ever eaten a bufflehead, buffleheads are like that all year long, and they're just not good ducks to eat. So that's one of the big reasons why they set the duck season, is because the palatability of the animal is much better during the season. And it's also for conservation reasons. You don't want to shoot paired up ducks that are laying eggs. You don't want to have the mistake of shooting a fawn that might not be able to make it through the winter, Or, if you shoot a doe and the fawn's right there, the fawn's going to be able to make it. That's why they set that season the way they do. Other questions?
A hunter I met gave me a piece of goose breast as a little present. I like to cook. I'm into cooking, but I don't know how to cook a piece of meat like that. What would you recommend?
Was it like a loin, like a backstrap?
Well, he said it was the breast. It's just a solid piece of meat about that big. He gave it to me in a Ziploc bag.
Sounds like a piece of the loin, the backstrap, like a steak, medium rare. If you like your steaks more than medium, you won't like venison, unless it's slow cooked. But most people I know who like steaks like them rare or medium. That's all you do. Do you know? Here's another another piece of easy information. Okay. Do you know the finger test for doneness? The finger test for doneness.
Yeah, if it bounces back.
There's a little bit more to that. So I used to work steak station at a restaurant. And yes, we're all touching your meat when we cook your steak, by the way. Just get that out right now. So when I'm on steak station, I've got my orders in front of me, and I'm looking at it, and basically I'm touching all of the meat to see where it is, right? So there's two ways to do it, but the way I was taught to do it is hold your hand out like this, and touch this pad of your thumb. Just hold your hand out. It's nice and gooey, juicy, right? That's raw meat. Just touch your thumb to your forefinger. Touch that same pad. That's rare. Go one finger in. So your middle finger. See how it's firmer? That's what medium feels like, just like this. That's medium meat. And you don't want to cook that venison any farther than that. You really actually kind of want it first finger and then let it rest. But now go one finger over to your ring finger. See how much harder that got? Now, you kind of screwed it up. You could still eat it. Now go one finger over your pinky. You know what that is? That's cat food. So this, by the way, isn't good even for pheasant or for pork. This is, you totally ruined it. It's literally dog food or cat food. You wrecked it. Somewhere around here, medium to your ring finger, somewhere in between there is good for pork and white meat birds. All red meat birds, by the way, the breasts of all red meat birds should be cooked like steak. All of them. Doves, ducks, geese, sharp-tailed grouse, chupacabras. Checking to see if you're listening. And all legs from all birds should be cooked more like brisket. Slow and low, moist heat. So if you remember, with ducks and geese, the breast meat, like a steak, legs and wings, like brisket, slow and low and moist. So, anybody here eat giblets? Couple, good. Giblets are, it's one of those things where, how many people shoot snow geese? Snow geese. They scourge on the eastern shore in the winter. They have some of the biggest gizzards in the bird family, giant gizzards. I weighed a snow goose gizzard that was 0.56 pounds, which was heavier than the hen bufflehead that was right next to it. It's a huge amount of meat, and all gizzards are meat, and I both have a video and instructions in the book on how to clean them. Those are perfect for the crock pot. You cook them slow and low for as long as you want. Like literally, a day is not too long. But at least in the morning before you go to work and after you come. But I have a dish that I do where I corn them like corned beef, and then I let them sit in the crock pot for a full 24 hours. And they come out and they look just like corned beef, and they're so tender you can squash them with a fork. There is no one, I've served this all over the country to the most skeptical audiences there are. There's no one who hasn't liked it. And I tell you that because there are other parts to the animal than the breast and the backstrap. And that's the other thing that I try to do, is I try to give you good uses for everything else that's not the money cuts of animals. So those are, I'm not going to get into it super detail. I mean, I can, but I've got it in both books and a lot on the website too. Other questions?
For the livers are healthy to eat.
The what?
Liver is healthy.
Livers, yeah.
But it's counterintuitive to me since that's the detoxification part of an animal.
You're half right. Of the food advisories of game, livers are most often the ones that they tell you not to eat. So, for example, ducks in the San Francisco Bay, you're not supposed to eat the livers. So actually, if you look online, your public health department will have, don't eat the livers in the Chesapeake Bay, which may be true, actually. But that's something that you would check. And in general, the older the animal is, the more sketched the liver is. Think about my liver, for example. I wouldn't want to eat my liver. I drink beer. But yeah, so if it's a yearling, if it's a doe, if it's younger birds. By the way, do you guys know how to tell if a bird is young of the year or not? It's pretty easy. So take the bird, and this is true with all birds, by the way. It's not just waterfowl. And look at the feathers right here. They're called the coverts, basically on the back shoulder of the bird. And if those feathers are rounded and they have a buffy tip to them, kind of like a beige end to those feathers, that's young of the year. If they're squared off and they're fully colored to the end of the feather, it's a mature bird. You can't tell how old the bird is, but it's either mature or not mature. And that's how you tell. Every single bird is like that. Biology tips from Hank.
Two questions. One, back to the geese breast. We get really big geese around here.
Yep, big old Canadas.
You want to keep, to the point where trying to cook them like steak can sometimes be an exercise.
That's a good question.
So if you want to, what would you advise in that case, especially if you want to leave the skin on? And then my second question was, what advice do you have for people continuing to get into hunting and fishing?
So the first question is, what do you do with big old Canada goose breasts? That's a very good question because big, giant Canada geese can live forever. A buddy of mine shot a 22-year-old Canada goose last year. They know because it was banded. And that is it was almost as old as he was. And so the trick with really, really old geese, and you have to kind of assume your goose is going to be old unless it has the buffy tips. You can still cook it like a steak. I wouldn't do the skin on, though. That's one of the very few places where I say, I don't know, because that skin gets rubbery. Ducks never seem to have that problem. Occasionally you'll get a really venerable duck, but in general, ducks tend to be fine. But the geese they can get rubbery skin. So I tend to take it off on a Canada goose. And the trick is slice thin. A Canada goose isn't a steak so much as it is London broil. So if you get a good knife and you can slice it thin, it'll be fine. But if normally when you cut duck breasts in, you're cutting like 1/4-inch pieces off. You're going to just be chewing for quite some time because it's just a really old bird. But that thin, it's just like making like fajitas or something. Like you just cut it thin against the grain, and you'll be fine. The second part of the question is, if you're getting into it, if you're just starting to get into hunting, fishing's easy. Because fishing, you can just get on a boat and talk to the mate and listen to the mate. By the way, as a former mate, listen to the mate, okay? We know what we're doing. We're here every day. And I I can't tell you how many times I've had anglers, good case in point, I've caught more striped bass than and I've caught striped bass in like 16 different states. But guess what? Catching striped bass in California is not like catching striped bass in the Chesapeake. Listen to the mate. Anyway, so that's the easy way to do it, is because you can just get on a boat on there. With hunting, a mentor is your best bet. And if you can't find a mentor, fortunately you're a woman, so there are lots of programs that help getting women in, like Becoming an Outdoors Woman is one of them. Okay, well, there's probably 0 for guys. And that's a big problem that a lot of groups are hoping to change. The other way to do it is sort of figure out what you want to chase. Like if it's waterfowl, I would recommend looking up Delta Waterfowl or Ducks Unlimited and talking to them and saying, hey, I'm a new hunter, can you help me out? And chances are they will. Because the habitat organizations, it's in their best interest to help more hunters get into the pursuit. And then guides. Find guides, a recommended guide who's good with new people. Because there's 2 kinds of guides. There's guides that are really nice people who are just helping you do your thing. And then there's the old crusty guys who are like, shoot up, and like, I've been with them both, and they can be really unpleasant, especially for new people. If someone peed in their Wheaties that morning, then it just can be a really off-putting experience. Find a recommendation from somebody else who's relatively new, and go with that guide. And a great number of guides, especially younger guys, will view it as a teaching experience, and they actually are really helpful. And I mean, I taught myself how to hunt ducks. When I was in Minnesota, I was only hunting small game and upland birds. So I came to California, which is one of the duck hunting capitals of the planet. And I mean, we have 9 million birds in the Central Valley in the wintertime. It's literally clouds of birds everywhere. So like, how do you not hunt? And nobody taught me, and I made a lot of bad mistakes. But guides, good guides, brought me a long way quick. And watch what they do, ask some questions, and it helps.
Curious about sourcing. Like, my wife and I lived here a little over 20 years, and we were fortunate. Our first year we were in our house, our plumber at the tree gave us the venison room.
Nice.
Told us how to cook it. It was great. Haven't had venison since. Oh yeah. I don't know whether to find another plumber who hunts her. But like,
put it out on Craigslist.
I can go buy rockfish and stuff around here if I don't want to fish for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hunt. But like, for instance, restaurants, there was a restaurant in Baltimore years ago. I remember going there on the menu with venison, goose, bear. How do restaurants get game as opposed to like, I mean, I can befriend, befriend your but what's the difference? Like, where does a restaurant get venison? I mean, is it farm raised?
It's farm raised.
So it is. But
So
like, I can't.
you can, but it's spendy.
Okay. I'm just curious. I didn't know whether.
So if you really wanted venison, first of all, if I lived here and I really wanted venison and I didn't hunt, I guarantee you have a friend who hunts and he hasn't told you about it. Because that's the other thing about hunters. A lot of times we won't tell people that we hunt because we just don't want to have that conversation sometimes. Because let's face it, hunting can be controversial. And there's a lot of people who just, killer, and then that's, you're kind of done. So a lot of people just, we just don't talk about it. But I guarantee you've got at least one friend who does. That's the easiest way. Because if you try to buy it, venison loin's like $30 a pound. It's outrageous. And it's because it has to be ranched, and it's just, you can buy it. Like, I know Whole Foods will sell it frozen from New Zealand, and it'll be okay, but it's spendy. Your best bet is to find a friend, especially with venison.
There's a place in Wharton you can buy it. You're only paying for the butchering fee. You're not actually buying the deer, so you get a box of meat basically.
Oh, that's interesting. That sounds like a workaround that's quasi-legal.
You legally can't sell it, but if you pay for the butchering fee.
I hear nothing.
It was like Don't tell that.
Where is this? I was only.
This guy's gonna get a ton of business. Yep.
Do you find any difference or any great techniques for cooking out in the wild versus cooking at home?
Yeah.
All of a sudden just become like, I cook it ridiculously long here and I would cook it in 3 seconds over here.
So if you're actually out in the field You have to simplify everything. I actually just wrote an article about this for Peterson's Magazine. But what do you do when you're out like a deer camp or something? Cast iron is your friend, because cast iron is much more forgiving. I have like, you know, what do they call it? Like a bug out bag for like preppers who think that the world is going to end tomorrow, which it may or may not, in which case I'll have a beer. But they create like a bug out bag, right? But you can do a culinary bug out bag with, and what I recommend is salt, pepper, of course, because you'd be surprised how many people forget salt and pepper. Cooking oil, not fat, because fat goes rancid much quicker. You can have a little bottle of like, I don't know, some sort of vegetable oil that'll last for a year or two. If you're packing it for deer camp, I always throw in a couple of lemons. But if you're just going to have it around, a bottle of vinegar, because you need something acidic. With game, I like red currant jelly, which sounds esoteric, but I guarantee you it's in your supermarket. There'll be like one jar, it'll like Smucker's, like red currant jelly. For whatever reason, I've been in like the weirdest, smallest places I was in Ashley, North Dakota, population 50, and the little IGA had it. So it's more easy to find than you can think. If you can't find it, like blackberry jelly is a good one too. It's got to be a jelly because a jam will have a bunch of chunks in it. And what you do is that adds some sweetness to your pan. And just a spoonful of that just brings everything up. Booze, which you should have anyway if you're at deer camp. Like I typically will have a flask of brandy or something. I happen to be partial to brandy, but whiskey's good too. Nothing super peaty if you're a Scotch fiend, because it really wrecks everything. And if you cook with beer, nothing overly hoppy. Hoppy will wreck your dish. Malty's good, hoppy's bad. Your regular macro beers are all fine. And then finally, you kind of want, like what I like to bring a bag of dried mushrooms, like a bag of dried morels or a bag of dried porcini. You can buy them and you'd be surprised. There's dried porcini in your supermarket. I guarantee it. They don't weigh anything. And you crunch them up and you throw them in there, bam, instant flavor. An onion. I mean, if you get a yellow storage onion, it's not going to go bad, And that can all fit in like an ammo box. And you can all have that, and then it's really small, it's very light, and it's got everything you need to make a really good dish in 5 minutes. I don't know, maybe 10. But, so I mean, let's just say we're at duck camp, and I had that little bag. Okay, we shot some mallards, picked the mallards, you got the breast meat with the skin on it, cast iron pan, little oil. Cold pan, because you got the skin on it. If you didn't have the skin on it, you want a hot pan. This is all in the book. And then you sear it just like a steak, except if it's a duck, it's a steak wearing a hat made of bacon. Because crispy duck skin? Oh yeah. And then, so it's resting. It's done. Then little onion in the duck fat. Boom, boom, boom. Maybe a little bit of garlic. Garlic's always good. Doesn't go bad. Hit it with a little bit of that brandy. Yay, yellow opa. And it burns down. Spoonful of the jelly. Maybe, half a bouillon cube. Maybe a little water. Maybe a crushed up mushroom. Let it boil until it thickens a little bit. Bam, done. It's, I call it pan sauce jazz. Because there are rules to it, but you can modify it however you want. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't need fancy ingredients to make good food. They're helpful, but it's not hard to get that stuff. Any supermarket in America is going to have some kind of either dried or you could go to the IGA and buy fresh button mushrooms too. But mushrooms add a lot of flavor and they don't add a lot of weight. So, we got any time left? Are we good? Or I'm perfectly cool to stand here and ask questions. Sure.
What's your favorite way to prepare
Fiddleheads. I blanch them first for about 60 seconds. So I'll boil them in very salty water for 60 seconds, and then I'll dump them in ice water. What that does is it sets like an incredibly vivid green. It almost looks like it doesn't occur in nature, except of course it does. And then after that, by then I'm usually getting morels as well. So I'll typically stir fry them in with morels, fiddleheads, often ramps, a little splash of white wine, a little bit of pheasant stock, and then usually I'll make some cavatelli, I make pasta. I make pasta a lot. So it's easy for me to make pasta, but you can use any pasta. And short pasta, though. And then boom, 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 finish it up, and then maybe throw a little bit of butter on it. Maybe 3 tablespoons. Let it melt. But after you finish cooking it, and you swirl it in so it all emulsifies with everything, done. Black pepper, always a must. And you just let everything taste the way it's supposed to taste. Like I know people who do like fiddlehead gratins with like all this cheesy over it, you kind of wreck it, So let everything speak its mind, especially in the spring. Spring's about finally eating something green for a change,
Where do you get your pheasant stock?
I make it. Thank you guys for coming. I know it was a hike for some of you, and I know some of you had to get off of work early and are out of class, and I appreciate you guys coming.